right, welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Luke with Luke F1 Fantasy, doing a little video, taking a quick pit stop from regular F1 Fantasy team selection news, because I wanted to follow up with my video from last week where I offered you the chance to see if you wanted me to give you a little bit of information on wrist injuries, with myself being a physiotherapist. So this one's got some pins, some pains, talking about the stress that an F1 driver's wrist will really go through. And we will hopefully inform you all a little bit more about wrist injuries. So, starting from the top then, this is a quick anatomy review. As you know, the wrist, full of plenty of bones, are radius ulnus, followed by a group of 8 carpal bones, which if you were in physio school like me, we have to find out different ways to remember the bones. So we had a phrase at school called "She looks too pretty, try to catch her." So as you can see here, if you're looking at the row of the bones, starting from the thumb, moving across, that is how you remember those bones. You also have your muscles, which is a little picture here. I haven't quite got all of them there, but just a quick look at what they would look like. And as well as the ligaments that also connect the bones together. So muscles help to control the forces in our hand. Ligaments help to stabilize our hand. So what does the wrist do? Well, the wrist facilitates a wide range of motions, from flexion, extension, radial deviation, ulnar deviation, and twisting, side bending. They all come from these bones here. And ultimately, the wrist is a bridge between the hand and the forearm. And it really lets us do everything from lifting to pushing to texting, opening jars, and in F1, feeling the car. Now, in terms of injuries, the classic one that you can get with a wrist is a foosh, F-O-O-S-H, which stands for fall on an outstretched hand. So anytime that you fall, we instinctively will put our hands in front of us, and our wrist will take the hit and absorb all the forces. Now, depending on the severity, you can get anything from a fracture to a ligament sprain to a tendon strain, or even joint dislocations. And the recovery can be anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks, depending on the damage. So why do the wrists matter in F1? Well, for an F1 driver, the wrist is the main connection to the car. So it is critical that they are able to have the range of motion to turn the wheel, strength to hold against forces up to 5 Gs. And you got to think about it too, from a racing car, from an F1 car, they don't have power steering like we do in our everyday street car. So they imagine turning your own steering wheel with the power steering off, or it's failed. Alternatively, turning a steering wheel while a resistance band is pulling against you in the opposite direction. That's kind of the load that the wrists are absorbing during that motion. The wrists also need to absorb the vibration from the car itself, plus the road surfaces. So this is imagining that you're holding onto a jackhammer or a power drill for the entirety of a race. And that ultimately is going to put some demands and stresses through the wrist that you need to be able to have the strength to overcome, as well as the endurance to last a whole session, a race, and ultimately a raced weekend. Wrists also need to have a soft feel to them too, so they also need to be able to recognize the grip of the car and when to react. They feel like the back end slipping out, oversteering, understeering, strong enough to prevent the wheel from snapping against them, but soft enough to react to those, to what the wrist is telling them to do, to be able to counter effect any adverse movement that they're feeling on the car. So what do we know about Lance's initial injury? Well, in February 18th, 2023, there or thereabouts, basically when it was reported, he suffered a foosh, a fall on an outstretched hand, following a cycling accident, ironically in Spain, which is where the last GP was, where he reported pain and he wasn't able to perform. So there are some reports that he had surgery in both wrists. So what likely happened was he suffered some form of fracture, potentially a hairline fracture, to one or more of the smaller bones, carpal bones in his wrist, that required pins inserted to stabilize and promote the healing. Now, when you also have a force that is enough to break a bone, most commonly there are going to be associated ligament, muscle, and tendon strains and sprains as well. So they would have gone through a period of recovery, but unless they were like severely torn, they would have probably let them to heal on their own. Now, typically, when you have a surgery like this, when you're inserting pins, normally it's like a 4-week minimum recovery, which was initially what Lance's team had told him at the time, where they were saying you need to target Australia or Baku as your return race. Which, when you looked at the calendar for 2023, that was about, I think Australia was like week 6 after his injury, and Baku was about week 10 after his injury. So that was certainly putting it in that time frame that I would agree with. So he still had a top medical team around him, but it was still surprising to me, at least, that he was cleared for the race literally 2 weeks later in Bahrain. However, the proof is in the pudding, and he turned up to Bahrain 2 weeks later, qualified P8, finished P6, kept it on track, meaning that, he did display and he was able to overcome the demands needed to finish the race. But what was interesting is that, I'll show you some slides and a couple pictures here, but what I did notice was that from the onboard cameras, both in sort of the practices and the race, he really was struggling to turn the wheel to the right, quite noticeably with his left hand. You can see here in certain slides that he's not really fully able to grip the steering wheel, and he's using the heel of his hand to turn the wheel. So this is telling me that both his grip strength and his range of motion, specifically into pronation, was still a factor, and he was still feeling the effects of the injury. And Lance did allude to this in his post-race comments after the race, saying pain was a big factor. But nevertheless, he continued to get better. He finished the race and the season without too much worries. And we haven't really heard about him complaining about this wrist until now, almost just over 2 years later from that point. So what do we know now? Well, we know now, the reports have suggested that he was feeling pain in his wrist at the Spain Grand Prix, and he pulled out of the race. And he's potentially gone on to have a second surgery. So what does that mean for his racing this week in Canada? Well, it is his home race, so that's definitely giving him some extra motivation to try and be ready for that. But most likely, what he potentially would have had is a removal of one of the pins in his wrist. The removal of pins is a much less of a concern. It's, definitely one of the more easier types of surgeries to recover from, let's say. The recovery is way quicker. There really isn't any further trauma to the bones that need recovery. But potentially what may be happening is that the pin itself may have come loose. It's potentially now rubbing up against a tendon or a ligament, and that could be causing some inflammation. Sometimes the pins can break. That could also cause irritation. And so a quick surgery to go in there, remove the pins, stitch him back up, and he should be good to go. Now, so I'm not expecting the pain from the actual surgery to be too much a factor, but it's just likely whatever he's sort of dealing with that they had prior to surgery and now post-surgery. There's certainly some inflammation in that wrist, whether that's in the tendons, the ligaments. So they will need some rehab and some consideration. And his rehab will basically will be focusing about ensuring that he has full range of motion, especially to be able to fully lock and turn the wheel, be able to grip the wheel under high speeds, under high braking, absorbing the lateral forces of 5Gs. So if he does race, I don't expect him to have too many difficulties. Certainly, he should be a better position than he was going into Bahrain in 2023. His strength and range of motion, I don't suspect to have been decreased too much. But his rehab would certainly be involving restoring his range of motion to full pain-free, exposure to vibration, strength training, specifically his ability to grip, as well as some reaction and speed testing as well. And what's quite noticeable about Montreal is that it does have a couple of hairpin type corners, which do require more of a full lock on those as well. So that's going to be interesting, that if he does race this week, it'll be interesting to sort of see his onboard cameras to see how well he's managing in those hairpin type of corners. But will he race? Well, I guess that really depends to his medical team and whether they feel like he is certainly safe enough to race, which they'll be considering his ability to have full range of motion, full strength, pain quite manageable. He is, again, like I said, racing in his home race in Canada, so he has some extra motivation to really want to put on a show. And part of it is he fighting for his seat next year? I know his dad runs the team, so he does have that working for him. But Adrian Newey there now. Maybe there's talk of some other drivers coming in to take his spot. So, I think he has a lot of motivation to be there for this week. And if that's his track record and that he can recover after a major surgery to race 2 weeks later, then I think the odds are in his favor that following this more minor surgery that I'm speculating on, that he would be fit for this one. But is he a pick for our fantasy teams? Well, at 9.1 million, I don't think it's a really good bet for points this week. We have much more valued assets to look at itself. So that's my summary on risk demands for the F1 driver and for Lance itself. Moving on to the assets more likely to be part of our team for Canada. My video from last week is still where my thoughts lie, so definitely go and check that one out. Otherwise, I'll have a video later on for you this week following FP2, when we get a bit more of an idea of what drivers are doing and which drivers we're going to be more likely to move out in terms of favoring most likely Nico Hulkenberg to come in. So thanks again for watching. Really appreciate your interaction and comments on the last one. Didn't want to go too much into sort of high school or university level anatomy for this type of video, but hopefully it's giving you a little bit more content, a little bit more interest, so make it a little bit more different as well. So if you have any other ideas of other things, sort of physiotherapy wise, body wise demands for an F1 driver, drop some comments. I'll put some ideas. We've got some summer breaks and some longer breaks happening before races coming up in July. So I'm definitely looking for ideas for videos to put out during that time. Otherwise, we will catch you later on this week. Thanks for watching.